When we look at movies like Gladiator II, I think of these big scale films that why we go to the movies. And I'm so glad that they went forward in the path of the story that they did, because I think Gladiator II is ferociously entertaining. And it's the type of just mythic and massive filmmaking that only someone like Ridley Scott can deliver. And I'm so glad that he came back to give it to us.
It's got the massive scale battles. It has these unforgettable lines of dialogue that a Ridley Scott movie thrives on. And these amazing performances. You're getting Paul Mescal, Joseph Quinn, Connie Nielsen, Pedro Pascal, Denzel Washington, and they're all crushing it.
The scale of this movie is huge. I was really engaged in those fight sequences. I was thoroughly involved in them with the tongue out, like let's get blood, let's chop some heads off. Overall, it is an epic that if you are a fan of film and cinema and you want to watch something on the big screen, this is the movie you want to watch.
Hello and welcome to the movie podcast review of Gladiator II. My name is Daniel. I am one of your hosts today, and joining alongside me in the Colosseum are my fellow gladiators. It's Shahbaz. Hello, Shahbaz.
Hello, everybody. Are you here to be entertained?
I think they are. And rounding out our trio today, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife. He will have his vengeance in this life or the next. It is Anthony. Hello, Anthony.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, guys. I'm so happy to be here. Hello. Thank you.
It's an honor.
While we were watching this movie, there's no mics, right? Like, they didn't have mics back then. But the way these microphones. And I was wondering, like, how do these people hear? And how do they hear without, like, the modern technology that we have now? And it's like built into the Colosseum are these like little tubes of tunnel of hollowness, I guess, like little holes in the seats, where I guess they figured out that sound would travel and broadcast to everyone in the Colosseum, which was, these Romans, man, they had crazy technology for a time where, we right now have the craziest technology.
That's interesting you say that, because like you wonder so much when you think about like these stadiums. And I was thinking about that, like, again, not a historically accurate film, Dune Part 2, where it's just like, do they have like this technology that everyone could hear? Like they have these like microphones feel like such like a human technology. But yeah, you're right. It's so interesting to see how they would think about that. They're like, and there's probably certain areas within the Colosseum that when you stand here and you speak, this is where it's going to echo and reverberate the loudest. There's a Cineplex theater here that when you stand under it in a certain spot in it, they have like this echo ceiling and it just echoes everywhere. And it's so cool that like little things like that are being thought about all the way from back then. Now we just do it for fun. But it's wild to be here talking about Gladiator 2. This is a film that felt like a unicorn. Like, is this movie ever going to happen? Is there ever a possibility of getting a sequel to one of the most timeless cinematic masterpieces of this millennium, right? With the first Gladiator with Russell Crowe. And now we are here 24 years later. Ridley Scott is back with a vengeance. And I don't think anyone else could have tackled this movie other than him. And we're going to get to all of that. But I just love to know for both of you, I know how much this movie means for both of you, but I would love for you to remind the audience of why Gladiator means so much to all of us. And Anthony, I'd love for you to start us off.
For me, and I think for my generation, and for many generations before me, was the first of that type of movie, right? Like, I think before that was like Ben-Hur, and you had Moses, and those big, huge, the 10 Commandments, those big, huge cinematic epics that were captured in such a way. And when I went to go watch Gladiator in theaters, it was like, wow, this is huge. This is something I have never experienced. Like, at that point, I've experienced dinosaurs, we've experienced aliens, we've experienced, friggin' the Matrix and whatever the technology that came from that. But when it comes to Gladiator, it was like I was transported to a time where everything that they done was built by hand and introduced to Russell Crowe and his character Maximus, which I think at this point is one of the greatest cinematic characters to be on screen. It's full circle for me to be able to talk about Part 2, to be able to interview the new Gladiator. That is just I would never have expected it.
Yeah, and here we are, and just a little tease to what's to come next week on the movie podcast. We do have star of Gladiator II, Paul Mescal, joining us. Lucius himself is here to talk all about the film, so stay tuned for that. We have a lot of fun conversations with him coming for that. But Shay, how about for you? I think you and I are very similar, where when we think of Gladiator, we think of physical media and where physical media was at that time, where it's like you own that movie on VHS, you owned it on DVD, you owned it on Blu-ray, you owned it, that's the film that was always one of the first ones to become part of people's collections because it was that much of a staple.
Yeah, as an Italian, I think it's a very important film. No, like you said, Daniel, like we've talked about it many times, you'd always see the Gladiator DVD at somebody's house, and that was kind of like my introduction to this movie. It was just everywhere. It was that new era, the 2000s that just kicked in. The world was starting to adapt technology in a different way. And then we had this film that was still so tactile, that was still so old school in the filmmaking. And that even in that time where people were starting to move towards that CG landscape. So you have a movie like Gladiator where you can do it with a big scale epic. And Ridley Scott's one of those directors that like he'll make these amazing films, and he'll have these movies that come out here and there that maybe just don't hit all the time. But I love that he still had this love for these big scale epics. And even if you look back to not too long ago, The Last Duel, for example, like it's a boots on the ground film. There's not, at least you can't really tell there's that much CGI in that film. There's big battles, there's big scale happening, even though it's a much smaller story. So having Ridley Scott back for a movie like this, it just makes absolute sense because he has this love for the pageantry of it all. And I love that he's just going to make a really big film and he wants the audience to get lost in it.
What I love about Ridley, and I think what I love about just because Ridley he used CG in such a way where it never was noticeable. And at that time, it was like, yeah, we can use CG as a tool, but not overuse it. And that's why Gladiator stands out with those sequences, especially when they enter the Colosseum and they look around. Like that's to this day still looks fantastic.
And Ridley Scott's got that dog in him, man. Like I just hope he keeps making movies. We're talking about someone like Clint Eastwood recently too, 94 years old, directing Juror Number 2. It's like these directors want to keep making movies, and I hope they get to keep making movies because they are the last of the old guard of filmmakers who are coming from a time where film was, was like looked upon as like, this is how we are telling our stories. This is how we are protesting. This is how we are doing things that are important to us. And I think Ridley Scott is just, he shows why he's, I think, one of the best to ever do it in Gladiator 2. So I'm so happy that we get to talk about it today. Gladiator 2 is in theaters November 22nd. And I want to say a huge thank you to our friends at Paramount Pictures for inviting us to watch the film and to participate in the interviews. We're running a giveaway right now. If you want to win tickets to see it early, make sure you check out the movie podcast on Instagram so you can see how you could win tickets to see it ahead of everybody else. So you could brag and rub it in people's faces and say, I got to see Gladiator 2 before you, because why not? That's what we're about here. We are so excited to talk all about this. Like we said, Paul Mescal is going to be on the show next week. This film has an absolute stacked cast. We're talking Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Connie Nielsen, Denzel Washington, Joseph Quinn. Like it's an embarrassment of riches, and we have a lot of people coming back from the first film. Obviously, like we said, Ridley Scott. We have the cinematographer John Matheson also back from the first film here to bring that look and bring that cohesion to the world of Gladiator. But let's get to our first reactions. And Shahbaz, you're going to start us off.
Gladiator 2 is a big screen epic. It's got the massive scale of battles. It has these unforgettable lines of dialogue that a Ridley Scott movie thrives on, and these amazing performances. You're getting Paul Mescal, Joseph Quinn, Connie Nielsen, Pedro Pascal, Denzel Washington, and there's millions that we've already left out, and they're all crushing it. They're bringing their best. They know what kind of movie they're making. They know that they're following up the first Gladiator movie after many years. They know that the odds are against them. And you can tell that everybody feels that because they're bringing such a performance. Is this movie bigger and better than the first one? No, I still think that the first Gladiator film is the heart and it's the best one out there. But is this a worthy sequel? Absolutely. It's so necessary, and I'm so glad it exists because I had such a blast watching it. And I hope more people go watch a movie like this because we need films like this. We need films that take these giant risks, that make these massive sets and bring the world to life. And, they have fun while doing it. There's bloody action in this movie. There's moments where we literally gasped and cheered out loud. I literally felt like I was at the Colosseum while watching this movie because I was cheering for my favorite gladiator on the screen. And Paul Mescal, he's got a warmth to him. He's such a lovely, lovely person. I remember when I watched After Sun, I was like, I'll watch anything that this guy does next. And I really want to watch his show that he was on as well before After Sun and all that came out. So really damn good movie. I'm so happy it exists, and I'm so glad we're going to talk about it today.
It's crazy to think that a movie like Gladiator 2 can exist because, again, it was that unicorn film where it's like, is this going to happen? Like, I feel like we were talking about it throughout the pandemic too, where like with the Matrix, where I remember we were doing a main episode of the show and Anthony's like, oh, the Matrix 4 is happening. And we're like, there's no way that movie's happening. Gladiator 2 is in that same breath where it's like, there's no way there's going to be another Gladiator. They're not going to do it. Maximus is dead. Like, Russell Crowe's gone. And I'm so glad that they went forward in the path of the story that they did, because I think Gladiator 2 is ferociously entertaining. And it's the type of just mythic and massive filmmaking that only someone like Ridley Scott can deliver. And I'm so glad that he came back to give it to us, because like Shay said, I don't think this film surpasses the hearts emotionally of what the first Gladiator film was. But scale-wise, again, I just think we're in a different time technically, so we can go bigger. I think this film feels larger than the first film does in a sense of what's possible with the animals on screen, with the water in the Colosseum. There's a lot that's happening in this film. Technically, that makes it bigger in scale. But does that always hold that emotional stake that the first one did? We're going to explore that a bit more. But Anthony, please jump on in with your first reaction to Gladiator 2.
Yeah, same here. I think the scale of this movie is huge. And it really reminded me of watching Gladiator in theaters back in 2001 when it came out.
Or 2000.
Sorry, 2000. Yeah, 2000. It was... when you go into a world like this, you have no choice. And we've seen other directors try to recreate this, but again, it's heavily CG, heavily focusing on, relying on computer graphics to create a lot of these things. Where Ridley's like, I'm going to use both, especially with the animals, because those animals are not real. But I'm still
God.
I'm still going to create, this environment for the audience and recreate that type of filmmaking that we haven't seen. And last year was Napoleon around this time, which had great battles, and it was a huge undertaking because we learned about Ridley and how he, has 1,700 cameras shooting at once, and he's editing under a tent, and he's everything's happening, and the explosions, and then I can't imagine what he went through with this, and Paul Mescal going through the rigorous training and also the pressure of being, the next gladiator, like the guy who takes over Maximus, takes over Russell Crowe's character. Because like I said, that character is so loved, and that movie's so loved. Like it's one of the greatest movies of all time, right? Like Gladiator, you think of it today, like just from beginning to end, the revenge tale, the heartbreak, the whole sequences in the Colosseum, the tiger fight sequence, crazy. But then you get into this, and it's like, yeah, this is very similar. There's a lot of similar notes that Ridley's like, do I tell a different story, or do I kind of rely on what I've already established and try to connect the two together? Which he does. There are points for me where I'm like, that's too on the nose that I don't think we needed, but overall, it is an epic that if you are a fan of film and cinema and you want to go to watch something on the big screen, this is the movie you want to watch.
When we look at movies like Gladiator 2, I think of these big scale films that why we go to the movies. And that's a phrase that we always, talk about, like, this is why we go to the movies. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning was that for us. Top Gun Maverick was that for us. Oppenheimer was that for us. I think Gladiator 2 is exactly that reason for me. When I go to a movie theater, I want to be transported to a different time. I listened to the Gladiator soundtrack back to back to back to back growing up. That was one of my favorite scores. I had it on CD. What Hans Zimmer did with that film was incredible. And then as someone who's also a huge fan of the Pirates film, which were also those big scale epic movies that only could really happen because a movie like Gladiator happened, right? You saw the trend of what movies were after that first Gladiator came out. We got the Pirates, we got the Troys, we got these big epic films because everybody was chasing what Ridley did in that first Gladiator. Going back to Hans Zimmer, those themes are here in this film, but you don't get obviously what went on to be He's a Pirate, to those Pirates of the Caribbean cues, because those became very synonymous with the Pirates of the Caribbean film because, long story short, Hans Zimmer came in for Pirates very last minute to help out with the score because one of the composers left, so he reuses a lot of those same themes. But it's just funny how the score evolves in this, and the score sounded incredible. We saw this in AVX. We didn't get to see it in IMAX. We will be seeing it in IMAX in a couple of weeks, but it sounds incredible. And I think what's Harry Gregson Williams did with the score sounds phenomenal. This is a movie that I was just locked in. I was like I was sitting up in my seats like that the entire time watching it, because yes, it does go through the similar paces of what the first Gladiator film does. Here's this person who, shouldn't be in the situation that he is. He's thrown into this gladiator pit. He needs to prove himself. He wants to, revolt against, the emperors. But it's that classic tale of like a hero, losing everything, coming back and overcoming that. And I think Paul Mescal, his performance in this film adds so much. And like Shay said, he's one of those performers that you've seen him a lot more in smaller scale stuff, but he thrives so well in that. So when you take an actor of his caliber and you put him in these larger than life movies, he really succeeds. And I think that's why someone like Joseph Quinn as well kills it in this film. He is a sicko. He's an absolute freak in this movie. And it's so fun seeing him perform like that, because you're like, wow, he is absolutely vile as one of these emperors. And it's just so fun to watch that, because I believe it. I didn't see Joseph Quinn. Everyone in this film makes you believe they are the characters that you're playing. So you are just totally transported away to a different world while watching this. And then you add Pedro Pascal, who I think we are seeing everywhere nowadays. He is one of those guys that you just know him because he feels like he's part of every franchise. He was in DC, he was in Star Wars, he's in Marvel, now he's going to be Mr. Fantastic, he's in Gladiator. But I think he delivers such a great nuanced performance in this, and I think he's such a lovely pairing with Connie Nielsen's character. They share a lot of scenes together in this. And then you got Denzel. Denzel was one of those actors that I'm like, oh shit, okay, Denzel's going to be in this. Is he going to go full Denzel, or is he going to like turn in a different type of performance? And you kind of get a bit of both. Denzel, I think, steals so many of the scenes that he's in this film. He just feels like he belongs, because he's just like, I've been around the way. I'm gonna take what I can get. And I always think of that interview with him and Jimmy Fox, where he's like, I'm leaving here with something. And I think that's what Denzel does in every scene. He's just so fun to watch. And especially his scenes with Paul Mescal are wonderful. It's a very different type of Denzel performance. So I love to see him in this type of way, because he was just so fun to watch.
We got to talk about those action sequences, because like some of those, like we have rhinos, we have
rhinos, we got like there's sharks in the Colosseum.
The historians right now are just like, this is not true. They couldn't fill up the Colosseum with water. But at that point, it's like, sure, they couldn't, but you don't know that. Like, you don't know. Like, you weren't there. Maybe they did one day. Maybe they had one trial.
Maybe they did. Maybe they figured out the printing press. We don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe the Colosseum had their own printing press. It was very independent. It was independently run. No, what can you do?
There is a lot of really huge action sequences. A lot of them involved animals. Like, I think that was the big theme of this Gladiator. Like, let's get the animals involved, because you got baboons, you got rhinos, you got sharks, and then like some boats. So you had like a Pirate Caribbean type of thing happen, Pirates of the Caribbean. But like, I'm like, everything that was happening on screen, I was just watching. It never bothered me, or I questioned it. Like, when you watch Fast and Furious, like that's that can't happen. There's no way that car can gravitate that way.
Oh, you mean like Dom Toretto catching like a nuclear bomb? Yeah, like that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen.
I did, like, there was parts where, you know, like Paul's biting a monkey and I'm like, there's no way he's surviving after biting a monkey, because you know, dude, disease was also a big factor in that time period.
2 weeks later, Lucius is not doing too well, man. He's like, Lucius doesn't feel so well in 2 weeks after.
It's like Homer with the friggin' sandwich. Like, it's, you know, you're gonna get sick. But overall, like, I was really engaged in those fight sequences. I was thoroughly involved in them. I'm like, I was like with the tongue out, like, let's get blood, let's chop some heads off. And I know that's not the biggest part. Like, if Paul was listening to us right now, he's like, that's not the part. It's the emotional aspect of Gladiator. I'm like, yes, Paul, but it is also taking part in the most brutalist time period in the world. We need, you know, the bloodiness of that time.
Yeah, we're sickos too, right?
What I love so much about this movie is it feels so connected to the first one. Like, you could literally just watch the first one and then go right into part two, and it never breaks. It feels like it's one continuous movie, and that's impressive after so long, after making so many movies in your career, that you can still tap right back into that time period of when you were making that first movie and continue that same legacy. Because, yeah, like, I can't wait for this movie to be in IMAX, because we didn't get to watch it in IMAX our first time. But like you said, we're going to watch it again in IMAX, and it's going to feel like you're in the Colosseum. You're going to see everything across the board, and the effects are amazing. The set pieces are great. And like you guys talk about the action, it's killer. It's absolutely killer.
Since you mentioned the first film, Shay, and I know that's been a recurring thing that we've been talking about here on the movie podcast, let's talk about what we think the first film did better than this film. And obviously, we're going to keep it spoiler free. But if you guys could pinpoint maybe one or two different aspects of the first film that you prefer, or maybe you think spent a little bit more time than this one did. And I think right out of the gate, I'll start us off. I think the emotional punch, I think that's something that we spoke about right away, because, you know, that first one, Maximus losing his family, being thrown out from an empire that he thought, you know, loved and respected him and would stand by him. That's a very different story than what we're getting here, instead of somebody being more of an outcast. So I'd just love to know your guys' thoughts. What's something that you think Gladiator did better in 2000 that maybe this one didn't reach the heights of in 2024? And Shay, starts off.
I think the drama between, you know, Connie Nielsen, Joaquin Phoenix, that was a little bit better, I think, in the first movie, because it was just a lot more honed in and a lot more developed. Obviously, you know, love Joseph, love Fred. You know, I think they're so fantastic in this movie, but they weren't fully developed, I think, in terms of what we could have seen from them and what we actually ended up getting. I think there's a lot that might have been left on the cutting room floor, or a whole other story just kind of a bit more focused on them, because they come in and it's kind of like guns blazing, and you already, I guess, assume what their role is. You already assume how they are. It's kind of like you're filling in the blanks with these characters. Again, fantastic performance. Whereas with Joaquin and that whole story, they were really building it up, and you really got to hate him or love him or feel uncomfortable by him. There was just a lot more focus on that one character. And I think when you have two characters in this movie that are, you know, or more than two characters, really, obviously there's a lot more that happens in this movie, but you kind of lose sight on what to focus on exactly. And I think because of that, you have a lot of story going on. But in the first one, I feel like it was just more focused in telling us what it needs to be.
Yeah, it's like it was almost like Moneyball, where it's like we can't replace him, but we could recreate him. And it's like we have two of them that they were going to come in here and try and replace what that exactly. One did. And again, they're both fantastic in this film, but you're so right. I think there was an emotional depth to Joaquin Phoenix's character in that first film, and a real connection more to the characters, and to Lucius, especially to Russell Crowe, to Lucius and to Maximus, especially, where Lucius, being the main character, feels a lot more further removed from who these two emperors are. Anthony, how about for yourself? What's something that you prefer the first film did over the sequel now?
I gotta say, it is that relationship between Commodus and Maximus, because there's such a hatred, and I didn't feel the hatred with Lucius, because it's hard to like, because you no matter how you look at it, you're always going to compare it, right? But it's hard to like recreate that now, and they try to in the terms of this revenge tale for Lucius, but it just never hits it never hits the heart as much as Maximus, who was this general who was loyal to Marcus Aurelius, who wanted to give Rome back to the people. And then there's Commodus, who kills his father, and there goes and kills Maximus's son and child, and wife and child. And there's that long growing hatred, and you felt like you want the revenge. And in this movie, I never felt that way. I never felt that revenge was strong enough for me to be like immersed into it, you know. And that's just, I think that was the first one to do it, and they try to recreate it in this one, and it doesn't feel the same way. As well as the emperors, and as much as they looked and felt dangerous, I never really was scared of them as much as I was scared of Commodus, because he was doing a lot of the manipulation behind the scenes.
Something that we kept seeing online, and this is unfortunately the culture of today as well, when you see a movie coming out and things start to leak from it. Everyone was getting upset. They're like, what? I'm hearing that, Pedro Pascal only has 20 minutes in this movie. I don't think people know how long 20 minutes is in a movie. Like, that is a lot of screen time in a film. And let me be the first one to say this. Pedro Pascal, he's in this movie a lot. Like, there's no shortage of him. You never feel like, oh man, it's been like 4 hours since you last seen Pedro. No, you get a really good amount of him, and every scene that he's in is so impactful. I don't understand where this culture is coming from. Like, just enjoy the movies. Who cares if an actor's in the movie for 2 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever? Like, trust us. Like, the director has a vision. Follow through with it.
Yeah, it's quantity, not quality, right? Or it's quality,
not quantity.
Yeah. So,
and it's a big cast, right? But it's not a cast it's a huge cast with big stars. So when you see, a name like Pedro Pascal, you think this is his movie. It's like, nah, it's not. It's actually Paul's movie, and Denzel Washington's also in it. Like, there's no competing, but Ridley wants to have these characters be on screen, and I think a lot of them took this role because they want to work with Ridley Scott too, because he's making these movies that will have a huge legacy, and they want to be part of it. So there's pros and cons to being 20 minutes or 10 minutes. Like, hey man, you can be there for 5 minutes and have a very powerful scene.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I mean, look at Oppenheimer, right? I think even the caterers were all Oscar winners on that film. Like, everyone surrounding that film, like, just look at it as like, there's people of substance and of grand acting ability surrounding this world, and you like that. I want to quickly give a shout out to Peter Craig, who's one of the writers of this film, who, when you look at his filmography in the last 15 years, I think has contributed to some of my favorite movies of all time. Storms Out of the Gate with The Town. He also did Bad Boys for Life. He did The Batman. He did Top Gun Maverick, and now he's done Gladiator II. Like, this is somebody who has really attached himself to some of the greatest films of the last 15 years. And I just really am curious to see where Gladiator goes from here. We have a huge film franchise that is returning after, a quarter of a century. So it's like, what are we going to do next? I know Ridley said that he wants to do a third one. We'll see if he gets to do it, or if it's going to happen. We hope this one does well. Really quickly, before we get to our final recommendations, any thoughts on where we're going to see Gladiator 2 land box office wise? Let's go by the end of its run. So by the end of its run, it's coming out Thanksgiving weekend. It's opening up with Wicked as well too in theaters. It's going to have a long, hopefully, run in theaters before it comes out to be watched at home. What do you guys think this is going to do worldwide by the end of it all? And Anthony, let's get you to start us off.
I'm going to say 450 million.
Okay,
maybe 500 million worldwide.
Yeah.
I don't know the ticket, how they do those predictions of tickets right now. No one's talking about them yet. So, but I think 500 million.
Yeah, I think it will maybe hopefully land, 550 to 650. more would be even better, but fingers crossed, because I think this is a film that deserves it. Shahbaz, how about yourself?
Yeah, I was right there with around 500 million as well, because I would love for this movie to do well, but I feel like nowadays it is impossible to guess what movies people want to see. Like,
So true.
Yeah.
Terrifier 3 making that much money, I'm blown away. I'm not completely surprised, but I'm definitely a little gobsmacked with that one. But then you have other movies like Joker 2, which I think I have more money right now in this box beside me. I think I have $20. That might have made more. I don't know. Like, it's impressive how the world is going to watch movies nowadays, and
so
I just
true.
feel like I can't predict it. I feel like we need to study this new algorithm a lot more.
I do wish one thing I wish Ridley Scott will do, and if he does a third one, is because it takes place outdoors, like, let's utilize the IMAX camera. I know this is, up-resed or whatever they do to make it into IMAX, but let's use IMAX cameras for the next one, because, these battles can be shot that way. I know there's a lot of digital sequences, but let's try it, man. Let's try using these IMAX cameras. It can't be only Christopher Nolan or Jordan Peele. Ridley, you have the talent. Use these cameras.
100%. We'll see what happens with the future of Gladiator 2. Again, we're going to have our Discord channel open for you to talk all about it once you watch it. It is actually releasing earlier, across the pond for us. So it's going to be opened a week earlier, I believe, in Europe and in Australia. So US is getting in here for their Thanksgiving weekend. So our Discord channel will be open for you to talk all about it. But let's get to our final recommendations. Shahbaz, I'm going to get you to start us off.
This is a watch it. It's a must watch. Like, this is classic filmmaking. This is magnificent filmmaking at its finest. And you owe it to yourself to watch a movie that can give you all those emotions, give you all those feelings, and can make you feel like you're sitting right at the Colosseum.
I love it. You know what? I've been debating about this a lot. I've been thinking about this film a lot. I love Gladiator 2. I am so happy that this movie exists. I think it is just massive. It made me so happy watching it. It's one of those films that I was so happy when it finished, because I'm like, I cannot wait to watch it again and to bring my dad to watch it and watch it over the holidays. I'm going to give this a real gem. This is why we go to the movies. This makes me so happy to have more Gladiator back in the world. And I think it is firmly, if not my favorite, in my top 3 films of 2024. I truly, truly love this movie. Anthony, take us on home.
Put the turkey leg down, or take it with you to the movies, because you should watch it. I know that was like, it's happening Thanksgiving weekend, right? Like American Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
I was like, man, I don't remember anything about turkeys in this movie. I must have skipped that part.
But yeah, like, this is a watch it. Go watch it, enjoy it. I don't know if you could bring the kids, maybe. Yeah, who cares?
Bring the turkey leg with you.
Bring the kids.
I was young when I watched the first Gladiator.
Yeah.
You gotta learn sometime, right?
There's some interesting scenes, but I think in the grand scheme of filmmaking, this is something you want to experience, and you don't want to miss out. You don't want to be like, oh, I didn't think about going watch. I didn't think I should watch it, and you have to watch it at home. This is something you want to kind of go to the theaters and enjoy and embrace.
Definitely do that. Gladiator 2 is in theaters, like Anthony said, over Thanksgiving. Bring or do not bring a turkey leg, depending on the laws and the etiquette of whatever theater you are part of. We are the Movie Podcast. We're so happy that you're here. You could check out our show notes for everything you need to know, where to follow us, where to check out our latest interviews, our latest main episodes, our discussions. There are so many incredible episodes out for you to watch right now. If you like what we're doing, consider subscribing on YouTube, on podcast feeds, wherever you are, and join our Discord. A like goes a long way. We're so glad that you're here, and we have so many incredible episodes to come before the end of the year. That was This Time with the Movie Podcast, and we'll see you next.